Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome everyone into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology turned podcast. Everyone, welcome into the program. I hope that you're doing well, you've had a great week, and you are ready for today's program. Because today on the show, we have the one, the only Mr. Ralph Bond. He'll be joining us here in just a moment to talk about, well, 4 amazing stories. And you really want to hear these because they're probably, unless you, don't get me wrong, if you subscribe to, university publications, scientific journals, all that kind of stuff, maybe you have a shot. But 4 amazing stories that really show the good side of technology, the side that's going to save humanity and everyone. It's like the opposite of Black Mirror. It's really, really good. So check out today's show, computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything, including past shows, future shows, show notes, articles, videos, reviews, anything that we do here at Computer America. The show notes are very key because that's where you'll find everything that we talk about today, including links to articles, videos. So if you're driving, you can't see the video portion, or if, there's just something that you would like to check out further, the show notes are going to be the best place for that. And that's again at our site. So with all of that being said, let's go ahead, bring Ralph on, and hey, we'll just have fun with it today. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, he is our science and tech trends correspondent. Ralph Bond joins us every single Friday to talk about a number of stories that really, are just amazing in terms of what technology is, where it's heading and what it is doing. So Ralph, welcome back onto the program. How you been?
I'm doing great. And boy, what a roller coaster week this has been. If you have whiplash from the stock market, we're here to settle things down. Fasten your seatbelt with sanity, thanks to the world of science and technology. And by the way, if you're new to the show, welcome. What Ben and I do each Friday, as he was alluding to, is we look at 4 recent articles that show us key trends and developments in a whole range of things: artificial intelligence, robotics, medical technology, sustainable energy technology, transportation advances, agricultural technology, space research, physics, you name it, across the board. But most important of all, especially we need this week, we're going to give you an oasis of positive news thanks to the world of science and technology.
Absolutely. And you have some fun stories here. And obviously we're going to start with story number 1, but we're going to do a little aside real quick before we jump into the stories. And Ralph has a, something that Computer America has advocated for, I guess Computer America was around since like pre-pop-up days. Banner ads, pop-ups, so on and so forth. So many ways that ever since, the internet has kind of worked its way. And, 2025, it's now in office products and things like that. Beware of what you click on and what you see. And Ralph, you had a little episode happen to you this week with, something as simple as a word processor.
Yes, exactly right. I'll try to make this as quick as possible, kind of a public service message. If you are a subscriber to Office 365, now renamed Microsoft 365, and you use the programs like Word, be aware of this. Yesterday morning, I was pulling up the show notes, which are written in the Word program for Microsoft, and I got a pop-up. And this pop-up said, "Oh, sorry, your subscription has expired and you need to renew. Click this button here to renew." And fortunately, and I'm so paranoid, I didn't click on anything. I talked to my wife. I said, "When do we renew our subscription to Office 365?" And she said, "Oh, that's every September." So I said, ding, ding, ding. Of course, that's wrong. And you would get an alert. You would get something saying, "Hey, your subscription is going to expire in a few days," or whatever, instead of an immediate. And it locked me out of being able to do anything with the file. So I, of course, was just freaking out. I ran all of my virus protection software scans and that sort of stuff, and nothing came up. And I rebooted the system several times, and for a while it was just still giving me that nasty pop-up. Then I thought, well, maybe it's the Word program. I'll try PowerPoint. So I fired up PowerPoint. It was fine. And bizarre as it is, Ben, after that, everything was fine. But what's very, very unnerving.
Did it look kind of like this? For those who can see the video portion, you can kind of...
No, it didn't look like that. It was a little more primitive than that, which is kind of interesting. And by the way, what I'm describing is a known problem. I went out and searched this and said, yeah, this scam is out there. And so, for friends, the main takeaway is I don't have an answer for you all about how to solve this problem. I was just lucky it kind of went away, although it still bothers me. But don't click on something if you're not familiar with something. If you're not, somebody says your subscription is expired and they've got a pop-up, stop, drop, and roll. Reboot, run your scanning software, investigate, find out, and get help. And I did alert Microsoft through the phishing portal that there was this problem. So again, it's a known issue. Just be careful, folks.
Yep, no, definitely be careful, but not even be careful. And this is something that Ralph did very, very well. So kudos to Ralph. And it's that because you can't always be safe, you can't always be cautious, you can't always, kind of use your best instincts, but be curious. I think that's something that we can do. Like when something gets in your way, a pop-up or, stops you from using your program or whatever, just look at the links, look at, maybe even like the one that I showed on the video portion said powered by PC App Store. PC App Store is not the Microsoft App Store. Little things like that are going, should start to raise your suspicions. Go and close down the program, go to your account, look at your subscription through the Microsoft portal, not through whatever links that pop-up is trying to get you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just curious and you just kind of, look for a second way to confirm what you're seeing, that will save you like that little bit of hesitation. If you're hesitant, Ralph, scammers are hoping that, you're obviously, doing the show notes and you're working, in Word all the time. They're hoping that you become annoyed enough and you just want to get on with your work. You'll just hit the button, pay it, get back to what you're doing. They're hoping that you are just, annoyed and you're quick and you don't think, and then they got you. So be hesitant, be curious, and you'll stop 99% of scams out there.
Yep. Agree.
For sure. So good job with that. And ladies and gentlemen, just again another warning that they're out there and they're getting more sophisticated. Be it toll, be it you have an unpaid toll ticket through text messages, be it pop-ups in programs, be it whatever it may be. Long gone are the days of poorly worded emails. They have much better ways of getting your money nowadays. So. Yep, just be safe. Okay, so with that little aside, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and jump into, which is always something that I, love to do, is just tell people to, be safe out there and be, cautious. But ladies and gentlemen, let's jump back into our science and tech trend stories, and we're going to start with story number 1 about a flexible robot, which is something that, we're learning about robots that they are going to take a lot of different forms, and this one looks longer than most, I will say.
Yes, this is a great story from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, their news website. The headline here is just really great. I love this kind of stuff. A flexible robot can help emergency responders search through rubble. Really, we're in uplifting mode after that dire thing about scams and pop-ups and all that sort of stuff. But let's get into this story. A little setup here. When major disasters hit and structures collapse, people can become trapped under rubble. Think about the Ukraine and Gaza. It's tragic. Extracting victims from these hazardous environments can be dangerous and physically exhausting, of course. To help rescue teams navigate these structures, MIT Lincoln Laboratory, in collaboration with researchers at the University of Notre Dame, developed the Soft Pathfinding Robotic Observation Unit. And of course, that has to be an acronym, SPROUT. So that's Soft Pathfinding Robotic Observation Unit. Now, SPROUT, this is interesting. And if you have the ability to come and look at the video of our show today, you'll be able to see what we're talking about, or come to computeramerica.com and get the show notes. so you can also see the links and pictures. It's very important. But with that said, Sprout is what they call a vine, V-I-N-E, vine robot. A soft robot that can grow and maneuver around obstacles and through small spaces. And first responders can deploy Sprout under collapsed structures to explore, map, and find optimum ingress routes through debris. So this is, and I said, Vine robot, that's a new one for me. It's a type of soft robot inspired by the way vines grow and navigate their environment, the plants. These robots are designed to extend and maneuver through tight spaces by inflating a flexible tube-like structure. So Ben, maybe for you and me both, a Vine robot, that's a new one.
Yeah, no, it's and just seeing the video portion, like it looks creepy. It almost looks like Alien or something like that, where
Yes.
it's just like something that keeps, kind of coming at you. But no, it's very, very innovative. And, you can imagine situations like what happened with Myanmar where, they don't have like the heavy machinery that they need. They showed, and just to tell everyone, like they showed at the beginning of the video, a gentleman carrying it, just by, with his arms. It's not something that is really hard to deploy.
Yeah. If you think about it, it's kind of like the size of a large shop vac. And the tube that flexes and goes through the debris reminds me of the tube in my dryer, that the lint exhaust tube, the flexi tube. It's about that size. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And try to give you a visual if you're just listening to us as a podcast. But here's the problem, just further set the stage why this is so important. Here's the problem with current robot technology as applied to searching collapsed buildings. So cameras, specially built for search and rescue operations, can only probe on a straight path inside a collapsed structure. If a team wants to search further into a pile, they need to cut an access hole to get to the next area of space. So try to visualize that. And robots are good for exploring on top of rubble piles, but they're ill-suited for searching in tight, unstable structures and costly to repair if damaged. That makes a lot of sense. So the challenge that Sprout addresses is how to get under collapsed structures using a low-cost, easy-to-operate robot that can carry cameras and sensors and traverse winding paths. So that's the setup for what the problems have been to date. So Sprout is composed of an inflatable tube made of airtight fabric that unfurls from a fixed base. The tube inflates with air and a motor controls its deployment. As the tube extends into rubble, it can flex around corners and squeeze through narrow passages. And again, if you're lucky enough to be looking at the video right now, you really get it right away. And a camera and other sensors mounted to the tip of the tube image and map the environment the robot is navigating. Wow. And the operator steers Sprout with joysticks, watching a screen that displays the robot's camera feed. Now, Ben, currently, Sprout can deploy up to 10 feet. So this is early research, folks. This is the nature of our show, early research. So it can currently do 10 feet, and the team is working on expanding it next to 25 feet. Wow, pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, no, and you can imagine for, it's not like a giant cavern system. Like a rubble pile is only, so tall after it becomes rubble. So 25 feet, I'm sure is, I'm sure a lot for a lot of different applications. It's really amazing.
Yeah, it is. And to your point about applications, the final little note from the article I'll share is, the author said, sensing in constrained spaces is not a problem unique to disaster response communities or teams. The research team at MIT envisions the technology being used in the maintenance of military systems, interesting, or critical infrastructure with difficult to access locations. So the applications for this are very, very wide. Great stuff.
Seems almost like they took the inspiration from, like plumbers have those little cameras that they can, kind of feed into pipes and whatnot. That, except instead of a I don't want to say a nice clean pipe, but a very simple round pipe. But what if it was filled with jagged metal and completely unknown twists and turns? How do you kind of get that camera in there? This is really cool, Ralph. I'm wondering if they can get it like a little bit smaller, because it actually looks fairly robust. Like you can see the gentleman there holding it.
Yep.
I'm wondering if they're going to try to make it, slimmer as well. But
Could be.
Yeah. But at the very least, looks very cool, looks freaky and futuristic, and hey, has, of course, amazing intentions. So love to see it. That's story number 1. And again, in the show notes, you can see all that there. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move from story number 1 to story number 2. And this one, we're going to jump on down here. And, well, this is something that I think Tesla owners this past year had to kind of really tackle, was how do you charge your car in really cold temperatures? Because, obviously electric vehicles, when you kind of need them, like the one area where they're better than, where gas is better than electric is just starting in cold climates. And hey, maybe story number 2 can really, and of course that's starting, this is actually charging, but still, making electric vehicles work better in colder climates would make electric vehicles more enticing to more people across the world. So Ralph, let's talk about story number 2.
Absolutely. And who better to understand very cold temperatures than the University of Michigan? So this story comes out of the University of Michigan and their website, which is just great. Headline: charging electric vehicles 5 times faster in sub-freezing temperatures. Yeah, so you sort of set the stage a little bit there, Ben, but let's outline the problem that we face. Current EV batteries store and release power through the movement of lithium ions back and forth between electrodes via a liquid electrolyte. Okay? Now, here's the deal. In cold temperatures, this movement of ions slows down, reducing both battery power as well as the charging rate. And I have a RAV4 Prime, which is a plug-in hybrid. So initially, it's in all-electric mode. And we have noticed, of course, in the winter that the performance is very different. The range is less, and charging time takes a little bit more and so forth. So I totally get what they're talking about here. So to extend range, automakers have increased the thickness of the electrodes they use in battery cells. While that has allowed them to promise longer drives between charges, it makes some of the lithium hard to access, resulting in slower charging and less power for a given battery weight. So that's the problem.
That's always a problem with battery. It's like, we have the lithium battery so figured out, Ralph, that it's like, you can get longer usage, but it's slower charging. You can get faster charging, but it's lower actual energy density. It's, at this point, we're playing tug of war with, what do consumers really want until we come up with a new battery.
Yeah, exactly. And so with all the setup we just gave you, drum roll, here's the news. A modified manufacturing process for electric vehicle batteries developed by the University of Michigan engineers could enable high ranges and fast charging in cold weather, solving problems that are turning potential EV buyers away, as Ben was alluding to in the very beginning here. As one of the authors of the team's research paper noted, quote, "We envision this approach as something that EV battery manufacturers could adopt without major changes to existing factories." So important. Not only have they come up with a technical solution to this challenge, but it's something they say can be implemented without big changes to existing factories. So important, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for the first time, he goes on to say, we've shown a pathway to simultaneously achieve extreme fast charging at low temperatures without sacrificing the energy density of the lithium-ion battery. And here's a little more on this. Lithium-ion EV batteries made using this new technology from the University of Michigan can charge 500% faster at temperatures as low as 14 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 10 degrees centigrade. It's astonishing.
At 500% charge time. And I know charge time is something that is, kind of a pain point for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
I'm imagining cold charge times are even worse. So that's 500%. Anyone would love that.
It's just great stuff. And the key advancement, the structure and coating demonstrated by the team that they created, prevented the formation of performance-hindering lithium plating on the battery's electrodes. As a result, batteries with these modifications keep 97% of their capacity even after being fast charged 100 times at very cold temperatures. So again, who better to know about being cold than the University of Michigan?
Absolutely. And who better to solve that problem? So lithium plating, a process I never even knew about.
Me too. That was new to me.
Yeah, very, very cool. And we also love innovations that aren't just, completely new batteries or completely new things. Sometimes just changing what you have a little bit to get a big improvement. Those are the more realistic and, implementable, if that's a word. Easy to implement changes are just as exciting. So very, very cool. Story number 2, story number 3. For this next eye-popping story. Hopefully it doesn't pop your eye. There we go. That's what I was going to say. Story number 3, and this is an eye surgery robot. And when you think about delicate, Ralph, obviously, heart surgery, pretty delicate. Any surgery within the human body, pretty delicate. I can't imagine how precise you have to be to, really do a surgery on the eye. And now, hey, maybe we're getting to the point where robotic surgeons are, making small strides every single day. So story number 3.
Yeah. And in fact, it occurs to me that story number 3 is the third example in today's show of wonderful technology and research from the good old USA. So this one's coming from the University of Utah and their website. Great story. Headline, Early Study Shows Promise for Eye Surgery Robot Invented at the University of Utah. Wow, so cool. And like you were saying, boy, what could be more challenging, I think, than eye surgery? But here we go. When even the most highly trained surgeons perform procedures on the retina, one of the smallest, most delicate parts of the human body, the stakes, of course, are high. No duh. Surgeons must account for a patient's breathing, snoring, and even eye movements when you're under sedation, along with the surgeon's own involuntary hand tremors or slight movements, while they work on a layer of cells less than a millimeter thick. That's the tremendous combination of challenges going on for an eye surgeon. Wow. That's why researchers at the University of Utah's John A. Moran Eye Center and the John and Marcia Price College of Engineering have collaborated to create a new robotic surgery device that aims to give surgeons superhuman hands. Wow. It's a great video, by the way, you're showing to the audience right now. Because the device, go ahead, Ben.
No. I was going to say, superhuman hands. It's for them to say that surgeons who are literally trained their entire careers to have really stable, steady hands, and then say, hey, we can make those even better is amazing.
It is truly astonishing. I just love this story, and a great example of upbeat news for you here. So going on, it says, because the device is not yet approved to operate on human subjects, testing required a human volunteer fitted with special goggles, and the picture for the article shows this, that allowed an animal eye, in this case, the eye of a pig, poor piggy, to be mounted just in front of their natural eye. Kind of a weird situation, but interesting. The robot is extremely precise, executing movements as small as 1 micrometer or smaller than a single human cell. What? And remember that there are 1 million micrometers in a 1 meter. So that gives you an idea of the scale we're talking about. It just blows my mind, Ben. And the robot is also small enough to be mounted directly to the patient's head using a helmet. So it's a very interesting, you've got to come out and look at the show notes, get this video that you're seeing if you're watching us now. It's look at that scene. It's just amazing. Anyway, once in place, subtle and sometimes not so subtle movements of the patient's head are compensated immediately in real time, keeping the eye quite still from the perspective of the robot. The robot also scales down the surgeon's movements, measured using a handheld robotic device known as a haptic interface to the much smaller surgical site within the eye, compensating for hand tremors along the way. Oh my gosh. Well, it's amazing. To wrap it up, while still in testing stages, friends, again, example of early research. That's what we do most of the time with this segment on Fridays. While still in testing stages, the device aims to improve outcomes for patients and supporting cutting-edge procedures, including the delivery of gene therapies for inherited retinal diseases. Wow. I mean, I'll tell you one thing, as a potential patient for something like this, it would sure be reassuring to know that there's all this amazing technology to help steady not only me, but the surgeon as well. I love it.
Yeah, the you don't have to worry that the surgeon had like a second cup of coffee and they got the jitters or something. No, they're good to go. And and seeing this robot, which I believe is looking through the video, it's right here.
There you go. Oh, it's fabulous.
Look where they have it there and just holding over the patient.
Wow.
I mean, it's Ralph. Like honestly, I started with this and I'm like, why is the surgeon kind of there and not somewhere else, kind of, telling the robot, do this, do that, and then letting the robot kind of do the entirety of it. But I think having the ability and, down to the cellular level, I don't know if,
Yes.
they're going to be able to get that much information, but Ralph, like to have that kind of instant feedback for the surgeon and they can kind of do the operation with anything that may happen. I think the human brain is still very much needed for, thinking through a procedure like this, but it is getting to the point where robots can mechanically do the surgery. And it's, so I don't know if we're ever going to be the point where the brain is, where a robot brain is as good as a surgeon's brain, but hand-wise, we're getting to the point where robot hands are better than human hands. And that's a good part of technology, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So surgeons still have a job. It's just they're going to have fancy new, kind of assistants, which are the robots. So story number 3, amazing. Story number 4. We're going to go ahead and wrap up today's show with, well, we've talked about pacemakers before. Usually they're about how do we get those things in there and how do we, kind of power them? How do we make them last longer so people don't have to do anything, to kind of get them in there? And, you don't like opening people's chests for no reason. Another surgical story here. And this one, though, when I say the size of a grain of rice, yeah, that is literally what they're showing. A pacemaker the size of a grain of rice. Check out the picture, but Ralph, let's go ahead and do the article.
Yeah, and this wraps up our All America, All USA Hooray segment for this week. This comes from Northwestern University, their website. Headline, World's Smallest Pacemaker is Activated by Light. Subhead, tiny device can be inserted with a syringe and then dissolves after it's no longer needed. Irresistible headline, right? Mm-hmm. Irresistible. So let's dive into this. If you're lucky enough to see the images here, come out to computeramerica.com, get the show notes, or come and watch the video, of course. As Ben alluded to, shows a picture of a fingertip showing the little tiny pacemaker next to a grain of rice, and it's actually smaller than the grain of rice. Crazy. So Northwestern University engineers have developed a pacemaker so tiny that it can fit inside the tip of a syringe and can be non-invasively injected into the body. Wow. And here's the key that just makes this so heartwarming, no pun intended. Although it can work with hearts of any size, the pacemaker is particularly well suited for the tiny, fragile hearts of newborn babies with congenital heart defects.
I never thought about that. You always think of pacemaker, and that's something, kind of as we age, we, kind of need these tools. But yeah, congenital heart defects from a very early age is, that this would be much less traumatic.
Oh yeah, this is such a great story. So smaller than a single grain of rice, the pacemaker is paired with a small, soft, flexible, wireless wearable device that mounts onto the patient's chest to control pacing. When the wearable device detects an irregular heartbeat, it automatically shines a light pulse to activate the pacemaker. These short pulses, which penetrate through the patient's skin, breastbone, and muscles, control the pacing. Wow. Designed for patients, who only need temporary pacing, the pacemaker simply dissolves after it's no longer needed. What's not to like? Amazing. The pacemaker's components are biocompatible, so they naturally dissolve into the body's biofluids, bypassing the need for surgical extraction. So not only do you don't have to cut open to get this thing in there, you don't have to worry about cutting the patient open again to pull it out. Right?
Yeah,
That's great.
You're not just leaving litter in there. It's good.
Yeah, it's just, well, especially for tiny babies, which is what they really had in mind here. One of the authors of the team's research paper noted our major motivation was children. About 1% of children are born with congenital heart defects. The good news is that these children only need temporary pacing after a surgery. In about 7 days or so, most patients' hearts will self-repair. But those 7 days are absolutely critical. Now, we can place this tiny pacemaker on a child's heart and stimulate it with a soft, gentle, wearable device, and no additional surgery is necessary to remove it. What a great way to end the show. So positive, so uplifting, so heartwarming, if I use a terrible pun.
No, it is certainly all those things. And I especially like this one picture that you can find if you go further into the article.
Yes.
They show, a traditional pacemaker, a leadless pacemaker, which I did not know they had. And then they show the new pacemaker that they have designed. Something. And it's, ladies and gentlemen, it's like the difference between like a phone booth, your landline at home, and then like the tiniest cell phone you could imagine. It is like the progression of technology is amazing to be able to do this. So very, very cool stuff. And again, as always, it really highlights that, Ralph does an amazing job at picking out the best parts of an article, but there's always more to these articles.
Yep.
If you so choose to kind of go through and find out more. Now, with that being said, you may say, hey, if you're following along with the show notes, there are more stories. Well, those are for you. It's really to show that, Ralph doesn't just pick the first 4 stories that he sees and says, good enough for old Computer America. No, he goes through and he, tries to put together a theme and, to a show. And he also shows that it's not just these 4 stories that are people, that people are working to make the world better, but there's a lot more news out there. We just don't have time for it. We tried to condense our show a little bit to make it easier to listen to. And, well, Ralph, we can at least give the nice folks the headlines, and then they can come out to Computer America, check out the show notes all the way at the bottom, honorable mentions, links to everything, and they can check out more if they so choose. So let's do the headlines for the honorable mentions.
You got it. The first one is from Science Magazine, and we're going to have 4 honorable mentions. Headline, Unlocking the Future of Green Energy, Exploring Hydrogen Production from Marine Microbes. Ben and I have been talking about hydrogen production for years now. This is an interesting twist dealing with marine microbes. Fun story. Check it out.
Honestly, it looks like something a tech bro from California would sell you, to drink every single day as like meal replacements. It's like, hey, don't even worry about food anymore. Just drink the stuff in this article and you'll be fueled forever.
It looks like some of those smoothies.
Yeah, like soy and whatnot. Yeah.
Soy and green. Okay.
Soil and green, exactly.
It's people. Anyway, I digress. The next one comes from livescience.com. Headline, Scientists discover major differences in how humans and artificial intelligence think, and the implications could be significant. This is such a fun article to read. Please come out and check that out. That's a good one. And then the next one from labmedica.com. Smartphones could diagnose diseases using infrared scans. Wow, another medical technology one. That's an interesting story, so come on out and check that out. And our last one today, headline, Airbus, the huge manufacturer of aircraft, right? Airbus advances key technologies for next generation single aisle aircraft. Now, the headline doesn't really tell you what this is about. What this is, it's referring to their plans for a hydrogen electric hybrid aircraft. And it's a good example of a growing interest in this technology that Ben and I have been tracking now for quite a while. And this comes from the Airbus.com website itself. So go and check that out if you're interested in aviation technology advances.
And hey, single aisle, that means every seat is a window seat. You'll love to see it. So, Ralph, you had amazing stories. And ladies and gentlemen, I have to say that, as always, I leave these segments thinking, hey, there's some really cool stuff that I can talk about this weekend, with friends and family. And it's always like a high point to kind of end the week, go out on a Friday. It's always a lot of fun. Ralph, I want to thank you so much for doing this every single week. Ladies and gentlemen, next Friday, more show. And until then, have a great day. Thank you so much for tuning into Computer America. And if you want to find out anything else, computeramerica.com, go there and you will find it right there in the show notes. So, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, have a good weekend. Do something fun. Catch you next time. Bye, everyone.